Hey everybody, Travis here from Wanamaker Photography, and thanks for joining me in another video. Today, as you can see, we are not out in the forest somewhere. We're in fact sitting in my house at my desk. This is because we're not going to be working on one of the outdoor aspects. We're more going to be focusing on the photography aspect. More specifically, we're going to be doing a time-lapse video using photos that I've taken recently through Premiere Pro. The reason I selected to do photos as opposed to just taking a video and speeding it up later on is because you can get a little bit more depth of field, and the aspect that I focused on for these photos required that. So there was a recent meteor shower that happened in the northern hemisphere, the Perseus meteor shower. I can go in more detail later on in the video, but basically me and my friend Nelson, as I've mentioned before and you guys seen in the hammock tutorial, we went out and decided to capture some of these meteors for a couple hours. So here's an example of what the finished product is going to look like. Okay, and now that you've seen what we're planning to do today, let's get in how we're going to do that. So first, a little bit of background information on what's going on here. I am going to be using Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Premiere Pro for this program. There's lots of other abilities to do that, but this is the way that I'm going to focus on. So a little bit of background history on what we did here. So there's a few different aspects of what you needed to do for both the photos and the tutorial here. So because we were shooting meteors, obviously we're shooting at night, which is a completely different ballgame than when you're shooting during the day. So you're going to need to worry about your settings a lot more. Definitely going to need a tripod. You do not want to be hand holding any shots for this just because you're going to make any blur. As you can probably guess, the stars are pretty stagnant while you're taking that shot, and to be able to capture the detail that you need, you're going to need several seconds. Anything over a few seconds is definitely going to be too long to handhold anyways, and you're going to get way too much blur. So some of the settings that I ended up using for these photos, like this one for example, I did have to increase my ISO. So typically I do try and shoot as low as possible in the 50 to 100 ISO range, but with these ones I did up it to about 1600 and sometimes even 3200. My f-stop was as low as I could get my camera to go, so it was at 3.5 because I was using my kit lens for this because it was the widest angle that I had. Another thing to be mindful of with taking astrophotography, which is the process of taking photos of astronomical events, so stars, moon, planets, whatever you have there, you got to remember that we are moving. The Earth is spinning, we're moving around the sun in our orbit, so those stars are not going to stay perfectly still. So with your time, you do need to kind of be mindful of this, because if you do take too long of an exposure, you're actually going to start to see a little bit of a blur, which is going to be a star trail. This is because your aperture is staying open for way too long, and with that, you're actually capturing the movement of the Earth through space there. So I do recommend trying to play around with it, getting your settings right, and figuring out what you're going to do for you. One of the best things that I've seen on the net when I started looking into astrophotography is there's two cases that you want to decide which you're going with. You either want to have star trails and making sure that you're getting that lengthy, really nice shot. Don't get me wrong, they make really cool photos, just wasn't what I was looking for. Or you want star points, and so you either want to be able to actually capture all of that information on those stars, or you want to see the travel. With the time lapse, I was kind of able to get a little bit of both, so I was able to see the detail of those star points while actually getting that movement as well as capturing those meteors. So let's get into the tutorial here. We're just going to go ahead and open up Lightroom. I have already uploaded all of my photos because I do only have the one body for my camera, so I'm not able to film this while I'm uploading it at the same time. So as you're going to see here, I have uploaded it. It is in a file named the Perseid Meteor Shower August 2018. I do try and put a month and year tag on the end of all of my file formats. That's just personal preference because I do like to be able to go back and see when I went to these places, and sometimes I do go to the same place multiple times, so it's just an easier way to make sure which times I'm going where. So as you can see here, I do have about 281 photos that I took here while we were out doing the shoot, and you will be able to see, where is it there? About midway through, you're going to see the camera move, and oh, there it was. So it just shifts ever so slightly to the right there. So if you look in that top little navigator button, you can see the actual shot where that happens. Again, it's a minute detail. With some of the editing, we might be able to pull that out anyways. Alright, so this is the library we got here. We're going to go over to the develop button. And I have already previously edited these a little bit, so you're not going to see any of the settings here. Once you've gone through and done your editing on your first photo, especially with a time lapse like this, you really only should have to edit that first photo. You can do something a little simple down here, so you're going to want to make sure that you have that first photo selected. Scroll all the way to the end. I'm scrolling. And hold down the shift button and click the last photo, and it's going to highlight and select all of the photos in that collection. And then you're going to see up here there's this sync button. If you go ahead and hit this sync button, you're going to have a little pop-up come up, and it's going to ask you to synchronize the settings from that first edited photo that you already did there across the entire board. So you're not going to have to worry about going through and editing every single photo to make sure they match. This way it's just going to pop it all the way through. The only problem with doing this is if you are doing a time lapse like this in a time where you're maybe going to have differing lights, if you're doing a sunset or a sunrise time lapse, you're going to have to go through and edit every couple of hundred or so individually and then resync just to make sure that you are capturing that, because if you do one quick edit through the entire thing, you're going to end up ruining your exposure and all of your settings, and it's just not going to look as nice. But you do want to make sure that it is minute changes, because if suddenly a third of the way through your video you go and you've made that adjustment and it really just drastically changes, you're going to notice that really badly in your time lapse. So you want to make it minute changes. So maybe instead of going every 100, going every 50, and then changing it just by one individual section on each of those settings there, so that it is just more gradual. So I'm not going to hit synchronize because, as I said, I already have finished this. So after that's all done, we have to export our photos. So you're just going to right click, or for Macs, double click, export, and hit export there. You're going to want to go and figure out where you want to place your stuff there. So I do have mine under photos, the meteor shower time lapse, August 2018, as I said. So I'm going to go ahead and select that folder there. I don't want to put any subfolders, and yeah, that's what we're going to do. So we're going to hit export. Now it's going to take all of those, prepare to export there, and it's just going to take a moment or two to go through and do that export. So maybe while we do that, I'll get into a little bit of information while we're waiting on that. We're still waiting for the export to happen there. We're about a third of the way through. So I'm going to go into a little bit of details about what we were doing there. So as I said, with astro and night photography, making sure you have a tripod there, making sure it's a stable tripod. I do have a really nice lightweight tripod that I use, so I typically will hang my camera bag off the bottom to ensure that it is weighted down so that people walking by or wind, nothing is going to shift my tripod. So another thing I would definitely recommend is either a cable or remote shutter button that you can use, which I was using while I was taking the photo, so that I didn't actually have to manually click on my camera for each photo. I just had the remote. I ended up sitting down and having a conversation as we're sitting there taking the photos, and enjoyed the meteor shower instead of just being so focused on my camera that I couldn't actually enjoy the sight. That kind of gets me into a little bit of a topic there that a lot of people are falling into nowadays is when you're out doing these things, you're so focused on putting your eye to the camera that you're actually missing out on a lot of the events. So making sure that you're actually looking up and enjoying what you're out there to do, not just strictly being there for the sake of taking those photos, but actually enjoy those things. If I had just paid attention to my camera, I would have missed this wonderful, wonderful sight of seeing all of those meteors flying across the sky, and it's not something that you get to see every day. It only happens a couple times a year. While I was taking those photos, I didn't just sit there and click, 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 click. As I said, I was using the remote, so I did have my settings at about 10 seconds, I believe it was, for most of these photos. So I would hit my button, the shutter would release, open up, take that shot for about 10 seconds, close, and then I would wait 2 to 3 seconds to hit it again, just so it wasn't a constant thing, or else it ends up just looking like a really clippy video, and that's not exactly what I wanted. So about 3 to 5 seconds between photos there, and you'll get a really nice capture rate for your time lapse. We were only there for about an hour and a half, and because of that, we were only able to capture those 280 photos that I needed. The more photos you have, the longer your video can be. You can speed it up, you can get more detail, all of those things, but that was just the time frame that we had available to us for that. A way to solve the problem of having to remember to hit that button is a device called an intervalometer. With that, you can actually set your entire camera up so that it's going to do all that manually. So you're going to show how many photos you want to take, how long apart with each setting, and bam, it's going to do it all for you. But did not have that available for my camera at the time, so I had to go about doing it a semi-manual way of just hitting the buttons. Now, with night photography and astrophotography, there comes a few other challenges. Obviously, with daytime, you're looking for the perfect background. You want to get the right setting. With nighttime, it's no different. The tricky part is a thing called light pollution. If you're trying to take those photos in the city, there's all the street lights and business lights, and all of that stuff is going to affect your photos. You're not going to be able to get a clear shot of the sky, or your backgrounds, or your model, whatever you're looking to do. So trying to find a way to get out of the city or getting to a place that doesn't have so much light pollution can really be beneficial. Nelson and I have previously used a app on our phones that was a light pollution guide, and we simply just pulled it up and it showed colored areas. The brighter greens meant that it was way too bright with lots of pollution, and the darker blues and blacks were where there was almost next to nothing, and it was pitch black when we went out. So we did use that when we went and did this photo shoot here, and this was, we were going to capture a really interesting, I don't remember what it was, simply because we ended up getting cloud cover, and with that cloud cover we made do, and we ended up doing steel wool photography. Hopefully I'm going to end up doing another tutorial on how to do steel wool photography, because it is something that's really interesting and really fun. So finding this area can be a little bit of a tricky task. Obviously, if you can't travel, if you don't drive, you're going to have to make do with what you can do. Surprisingly, one of the best spots that I've ever found for shooting night photography was right in the center of downtown London, Ontario. Again, Nelson and I had gone out. We were just looking to do some night photography. We were doing kind of some urban street kind of stuff, and we ended up at a park called Victoria Park, and it's right in the center of downtown strip, surrounded by businesses and bars and everything. And we're standing in the middle of this park, and we look up and we can see the stars. So we did some interesting shots there where we were actually able to capture some of the cityscape and the stars in those photos. And actually the photo in my intro with the red blur around me is another night photo that Nelson and I did there. That red blur is actually Nelson running around me with a flashlight. Again, we'll get into that because that's something that we call light painting. And hopefully we'll include that in another tutorial here. Okay, so our export is finally finished here. So what we're going to do now, we're going to head over to Premiere and opening up a new project here. Also going to name it Meteor Shower, Time Lapse, August 2018, and down to OK. So that's going to pop up our entire composition here. So we do have the final cut sequence over here. This will be where you can manipulate your videos and whatnot prior to. And then at the bottom you're going to have your timeline, so this is where you're going to do most of the work. So we're going to go up here and head over to import. So we do need to import those, and up to pictures where I'd saved it under the Meteor Shower time lapse. We're going to open that up. Alright, so here the easiest thing that I've learned to do here is if you actually click the first photo, as you can see, everything here is in numerical sequence. So it's going to go 7995, 7996, so on, all the way to the end there. So to save us all the time, I'm going to go down, make sure that options is open, and hit image sequence. That's going to pull all of these photos together and actually put it right into our time lapse. So it's going to be nice and simple there. So we're going to import that, and you're going to see it's about 9 minutes long, 9 seconds long, sorry, and that is our time lapse essentially. So we're going to go over, pull that over onto our timeline, and yeah, so it's sitting at about 9 seconds. If you go ahead and hit play or the space bar, that's going to play that right through, and as you can see, you do see some of the meteors, you see that camera movement, and you do see the stars kind of turning. It is a little bit slow for my liking, so I am going to speed this up just a little bit, which is fairly simple. I just go ahead, right click there, and I head down to speed and duration. I only want it to about 5 seconds there, so I'm just going to speed that right up and right to the 5-second mark. And that's just going to bump it down a few seconds. Pull your playhead back over to 0 and hit play. And there we go. You get a little shift, you get to see some of the meteors, and that doesn't look too shabby. So let's try that again. That might actually be a little bit fast because you can't actually see some of those meteors. But again, this is trial and error, seeing what you like. So speed that up a little bit. I'll try 6 seconds. Alright. Oh, that's a nice one. There we go. We caught a couple meteors in there. Not too shabby. And as you can see at the end, it starts fading out a little bit, and that was just because the cloud covering was coming in and it was just not working out, so we did end at that point. So you can kind of play around with it there a little bit. There's nothing too exciting about this photo right now, so I am going to actually do a couple adjustments here. So where I had mentioned before, up in this control panel over here, I'm going to hit Effect Controls, and I'm going to add a little bit of motion on here. So I'm going to start at the beginning of my clip here. I'm going to make a keyframe using the scale button here, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So probably 130, we'll click that. 130 right there, and that's just going to zoom right into the center of my photo, and we'll go a little bit into it, and we'll set another keyframe, and then from there, I don't want it to be zooming out the entire photo, so I'm setting a keyframe in the middle, so that it should be at 100% there by the time I'm done, and for the remainder of the video, it's going to sit at 100%. So looking back from the beginning again, it's going to be zoomed in, and just kind of slowly zooms out as the camera's adjusting, so it kind of looks a little bit more interesting there, and it does kind of help a little bit to hide that little camera shake there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and render this, just because it is kind of jumping a little bit, and I want to be able to actually see this here. Alright, so now I'm just going to hit play. Bam. Look at that. There we go. Nice simple little time lapse there. You can go ahead and save that. So you're going to export media. Another little dialog box is going to pop up. I'm going to change this to meteor shower time lapse. My spelling is atrocious. August 2018, and that's going to save. Where do I want that to save? Let's make that a little bit bigger. I want that to save right in my other file there. And presets, I am going to be eventually uploading this to YouTube. So I do want to try and have a MP4. Which one was that? H260. And YouTube 1080p HD. Again, if you want to go ahead and look at it, you can head over here, scroll through. It's just going to show you how that's going to happen. I always do hit use maximum render quality, and that's pretty much it. Head over to export, should pop it right through pretty quickly, and that's how we do a time lapse. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I am going to try and do a little bit more tutorials now on top of the other things that I'm doing. I do actually have a really fun event that's happening this weekend that I'm going to be bringing my GoPro along, and I really hope that we can get an interesting clip there. It's going to feature, again, Nelson, because it is going to be a work event. There's going to be a few other people there that are involved that I work with, and hopefully we have a good time and nobody gets seriously hurt. So stay tuned for the next video, and see you guys next time.